Good afternoon, everyone. BC Richfield here, coming to you live from London. It's just gone a couple of minutes past midday here, making it a few minutes past 1100 UTC. A really big shout out to everybody joining the stream live today. We've been getting, 8, 10, 12,000 people for these recently, which has been an absolute blessing. So really big thank you to everybody that's been tuning in. Thank you for all your questions, for everything, and for everybody that's reached out. So happy Monday, 29th of September. Big week ahead. Equity markets looking strong start to the week. There is a little bit of turbulence potentially on the horizon in terms of when we just look at our kind of news review. But as for today, again, because, especially off the back of having these pullbacks at the moment, right, we are looking at potentially opportunity central, right? So, nothing's ever a given in this game. So what do? Every week we set ourselves up with our plan. We have plans, multiple plans throughout the week, key levels we want to watch, areas of engagement we want to be part of this market. So we're going to lay them out today as we do every week. But again, rather than there be a kind of more of an educational spin on this stream, I'm going to save the majority of the time. We're going to try and keep and cap this about 45 minutes. Going to focus on Bitcoin dominance, ETH, Link, XLP, Asta, stable. And I can see here from Harvey as well, we've got one. Hello and good morning, Harvey. We can certainly take a look at Pepe for you. Fancy a little cheeky meme resurgence, hey, from one of the old school legends. Deepak, hello, my friend. Craigie boy, how are we doing? Anonymous Architect back with us again. How the devil are you? Good to have you all here, everyone. Thank you so much. If you do have any tickers, tokens, etc., you'd like me to take a look at, please do put the ticker in the comments and I will do my very best to get round to them throughout the show. So where are we? Let's start. We're going to take a very quick look at what I've got on the chart at the moment. I'm going to explain my thinking and then we're going to move across and we're going to look at what key news drivers we have for the week. Then we're going to dive into the charts, starting with Bitcoin. Quick sip of tea and let's get ourselves away. So why have I got this chart up at the moment? Just really, really important to understand cryptocurrency's place on the risk spectrum, if you like. We're always asking ourselves the question with, traditional markets, and obviously crypto plays a massive part in that, more and more so since the ETFs, etc. But are we risk on or are we risk off? Are the global economies aligned in a way that it's supporting the risk bid, or are we in a situation where defensive stocks, flight to quality starts to come in? Are we seeing the dollar? Are we seeing more investment into the dollar, typically seen as a safe haven, right? We've obviously seen that with gold, all right? And look, gold has been absolutely on a tear, but let's not forget that sits in the back of the mind of most investors in terms of, especially from their sentiment perspective, when they're looking to kind of cover if they're a little bit overly risk exposed. Gold, which is why everybody wants Bitcoin to become that digital gold, right, to become that hedge. But gold is very, very strong at the moment. It's showing that, there's definitely that little twinge of uncertainty that remains. Okay, we've had it over the tariffs. We've got it in terms of the geopolitical situation, the sad escalations that we've seen, obviously, with the situation with Russia and Ukraine, the terrible things that are going on in Gaza, right? And there is that, geopolitical instability. However, the markets have fared up pretty well for that. But it does seem like things that we're looking at here, like the NASDAQ, is really kind of, hammering that at the moment. And we're not really seeing that follow through with crypto, right? If we just add a Bitcoin chart onto here, we can see, both kind of had the dibs here, kind of following along with this. But you can see relatively they're kind of in tune. Yes, crypto was a kind of leading in this respect. It's only a 4-hour chart, right? But as Bitcoin really started to dump, we saw one final push up here in equities. This is obviously an index. This is the NASDAQ. It's the most risk exposed pretty much of the major indexes because it holds the most amount of technology stocks. It holds the Magnificent Seven, which are companies like Nvidia, Microsoft, etc. But we can see what happened here. Bitcoin really sold off aggressively. Ultimately, it's a riskier asset than this, and it has less kind of underpinning it, where we've had the great, powerful companies like Nvidia doing so well for the index, but we can see how it followed suit. We're now starting to see that risk bid a little bit more supported through here, which is what we want to see. Ultimately, a good risk footing or a good risk on footing for markets is normally very, very good for cryptocurrency, right? If people aren't willing to put that investment into riskier assets, then typically they're not willing to put it into Bitcoin, all right? So this is where we are with the NASDAQ. NASDAQ's looking pretty strong. I mean, it has been on an almighty tear for quite some time here, right? You can see the upwards trajectory of this. Very, very hard to stop this momentum. Ultimately, we've got, a very pro-risk, pro-interest rate cut president in Donald Trump, who's been putting constant pressure on the Federal Reserve to get those, interest rates cut lower. And ultimately that puts a little bit more money in the pocket of the consumer. People are willing to be a little bit riskier from the fund perspective, and the people that are really running or contributing most to these markets, your banks, your funds, etc. They are not getting the reward that they need from yields and from safe haven assets. So they have to push the envelope a little bit more and look to secure those returns from riskier assets. And that's where we see that capital flowing so beautifully into risk. So that's where we are. Ultimately, if we want to look at this as a snapshot, where are we with this? This is just the volatility index, right? This is the VIX. So this is the yellow line here. And this is the red line here. Represents the NASDAQ NQ1, all right? So as we're just looking at these here, we can see, they're pretty well correlated. When they start to line up together, we saw this, the volatility, obviously, as we're measuring it, doesn't always necessarily mean that it's bad for risk assets, right? But what we can see here is actually they were very much aligned when typically we see this relationship, right? What's good for risk? We normally see the VIX then starting to, go off a cliff a little bit. When they're aligned, it tends to mean that there's a real strength of investment in that space. As we kind of look back here, we can start to see a little bit clearer the counter-based relationship between these two assets, all right? So if I can get this one off of lock, there we go. Yeah, the VIX rising, the NASDAQ falling off. So that's why this is on the screen. At the moment, we can see they're pretty closely entailed. But what we really want to see looking at this overall is keeping the VIX down here below the 20. That historically is pretty positive territory for risk assets. All right. So let's take a quick look at the news, and then we are going to dive straight into Bitcoin. All right. So let me get the chart up there and ready to go. And then we're going to pop across onto our news, and then we're going to jump straight into the chart. So let me get you guys a new screen here. Here we go. So what are we? Monday, 29th. So for anybody that's not maybe been on the show before, or how I look at this, I'm following the US market. It's the largest market in the world. It has the biggest effect on other markets in the world and economies, and the US is the world's reserve currency. Okay, so as we're looking at this here today, we've got pending home sales month on month, and we've also got Trump speaking. That's always a really interesting thing at the moment when the markets are relatively flat. And what I mean by that is when they're aligned with expectations. So we saw that with the interest rate cut, right? People, the markets had, I think, 96% in the end priced in the fact it was going to be a 25 basis point cut. So when that cut was actually announced, it wasn't the most bullish thing for the market because the market's already priced it in. There's such an efficient vehicle. So what they're looking for there is sentiment. They're looking for early data. They're looking for the tone from, people within the Federal Reserve. All right. So that's, again, what we're looking for in terms of any of those speakers, but also that affects Trump, right? The president of the United States, arguably, definitely one of the most powerful people in the the world, but in terms of his potential effect on the markets, arguably the most powerful individual, maybe Powell there, but he's more representative of a body. So we always want to pay attention to what Trump says there. That's 6:15 here, London time. That's 5:15 UTC. As we go through on to Tuesday, we can see we've got JOLTS job openings. Why is this important and why do we care? Well, we should really care because at the moment it's the labour market that's really kind of driving the potential rate cuts. Ultimately, inflation's relatively stable, but still not down towards their neutral target. We've seen GDP hold really well. Actually, we had a little bit of a PPE scare recently. PPI, scare recently, but then that rectified itself on the last print as well. So ultimately, all the economic data is holding quite well at the moment. There's still a little bit of fears about how the tariffs and that will wash through. It's also hard to see with the kind of diminishing labour market because of the effect on immigration in the US, how these factors are coming together. But ultimately, it's looking quite good. So what do we want to see from job openings? Well, really, you want to see the labour market, as horrible as it sounds, still a little bit soft. If the job openings come in, if unemployment really kind of starts to go down as well, and that labour market starts to look stronger, the Fed won't feel so pushed to continue to cut rates. And while there's an expectation from the markets for 2 more, I believe, 25 basis point rate cuts, if the Fed would start to give off some tone that they weren't expecting that, then, that could really start to see some movement in the markets as we get that shift away from risk. All right. Now, I'll cover what we've got coming up Wednesday on Wednesday's live show. All right. But for now, that's the key thing. So I actually think a relatively benign start to the week. So let's check our levels on Bitcoin. Let's see where we are. And then from there, we're going to dive in to the other assets. Like I said, we're going to take a quick look at Bitcoin dominance, Ethereum, Link, XLP, Asta Stable, and Pepe as well. If you do have any others, I will try to fit it in. We've got about 30 minutes left in the show. All right. So here we can see we've got Bitcoin on the daily here with OKX. Let me just take a quick sip of tea. Lovely. Right. Now, let's get on with it. What does all this mean? What does all this stand for? What are all the boxes, etc.? Let me just run you through a real kind of simple view on this, right? So quite simply, I want to know who's in control of this market. Are buyers in control of it? Are sellers in control of it? Now, that dynamic can change and it can change quickly. But typically, if we understand that buyers are in control of a market, what we can at least do at that point is target some key liquidity pools where we believe price could be expanding to, right? So as we came in yesterday, let me just clear up a few of these bits on here. Perfect. As we came into this, right, and members over at the Birb Nest will know they get a Bitcoin report from one of the professional traders every day. All right, whether that be myself, whether it be Crypto Birb, whether it be Just Pit, Resume, Trading Tank. It gives people different perspectives on the market, right? So I get the pleasure of doing it on a Sunday night. I like that. I get to sit down before we see the equity markets open. We see the pre-market, and you get to lay that plan out for the week. What new information have we got to take on board? What new things do we need to digest? And then we want to put that into technical levels that we can see on the chart. So on a weekly scale, this high is just a monster level here, 109,998.9 here on OKX. Why is it so important? It was the high from back in January this year, and that high capped the market all the way through here until we got this large expansion above. Then we're looking for this area to hold. I'll explain the blue box when we drop down onto the daily. But as we can see here, higher highs and higher lows in the market. We've moved away a little bit. We had this super expansion here, right? End of 2024, leading us down into Christmas. Then we saw that consolidation. All right. We saw the market set that high and then pull back here. Then we started to see the resurgence. This is the area we really started to get interested. Ultimately, after this really large move higher, price was in this area of fair value, this consolidation for a long time, right? So this breakout was always going to be explosive, whichever direction it took place. Obviously, we managed to align it really well with economic data and sentiment, which gave us that little bit of extra impetus. You have to have that understanding of the market. You can't just jump on charts and start, looking at, levels, order blocks, gaps, bits and pieces like that. You still need to understand what's the market, what's it looking from in a risk perspective? What's it looking from in terms of capital, liquidity, etc.? Is the risk bid on here? Understanding that when you come into these areas of consolidation, it's about positioning yourselves in them ready for the next leg. But what we can see here is large expansion, consolidation, shorter expansion here than we saw here, and then a much shorter one here. Typically, that's the sign that a trend is getting a little bit exhausted. On a weekly scale, it has been one hell of a trend here since the end of 2022, right? So as we see these kind of diminishing returns, what are we asking ourselves with Bitcoin? Well, key levels to hold. The way I'm looking at this at the moment is this consolidation basically represents a range directly below this one. Price considered fair value in here. If we're looking at auction market theory, for example, which we always should be when we're looking at pricing, is price in balance or is it out of balance? Is it expanding, right? Are we seeing those impulse moves higher? Typically, when you go from one area of value, then you see the expansion, in that case, to the area where price was previously considered value, all right? And now we're kind of in this area that's stacked on board on top of one another. Now, one thing, and we'll look at this on the daily, that we're looking for here is to kind of hold these key levels. Something that I would say, I think I kind of removed it from the chart by mistake, but this weekly gap here is this inefficiency, right? So this is sellers massively overpowering the buyers here. The market moves incredibly quickly. We get these gaps where there's an inefficiency. We then look for price to draw back in here. And actually, this is the week starting Monday, 15th of September. When we closed this out heading into last Monday, which was the 22nd, we shot a little bit of a warning sign across because we got this kind of doji in here, pretty ugly doji, longer upside wick as well, showing absorption. Look, we took out this daily high. We couldn't get back through this gap. Right. So as the market rebalanced here and we set this candle, it had, a great opportunity to kind of break out here. And then the next key level on the weekly is this one, sat at 119,488. Why? Because it's the high from Monday, the 7th of July. And you might say, why is that week important? Well, forgetting all the news and fundamental catalysts here, look at it. That was the high that was set. No candle since, bearing in mind this was set in July, no candle since has closed above it. This is a really key level. Sellers own this level at the moment. So while we can say, well, we've seen a decent reaction here, this is where we hoped buyers would step in. We've seen it once. We've now seen it to some degree twice here. But, we need to see price really kind of hold this area. So let's drop onto the daily very quickly and explain a few more of these levels. Let me just get rid of that. So on the daily, it was really, really clear when we deviated here and we stepped back underneath, we were looking for this area to be retested. It was the last key pivot, right? We saw resistance here, resistance here. We saw the strong breakout atop. Then when we got back into this area, lovely longs took out the high, very, very sharp rejection, right? So think of it like this. If we're looking at the chart here, and with the focus being on these two candles here, let me draw it across there, do it in green. This white candle and this white candle. If we look at it like this, if this was the expansion higher, this is where buyers were really exerting themselves and trying to take control. Obviously, we should have always been aware of the prior all-time high here, which acted as a really key liquidity pool for the rejection. Focusing on these two white candles, something I look for in these strong, aggressive V-shaped reversals is this, right? Where's the base of these, right? And it's up to you. You can take it from the wick. I typically favor the bodies. And then looking for the base of the prior bearish candle here. Now, look, this is where all the buyers stepped in. Who do you think's hurting here when this happens? Yeah, when basically you get this whole move retraced here and then some with a big bearish move. Well, I'll tell you from my perspective what's happened here, or not from my perspective, is that these buyers have then been destroyed here. And from being in a lovely amount of profit, if they're still holding here, they're now in drawdown. What does that mean? Well, it means that if they then accept that they're wrong here, which a lot will, because obviously incredible buying power coming into this here, then that immediate return here within a day, all of those buyers taken out. Now, that sell pressure that's managed to get through all those buyers here, if those buyers had any strength to them, they would be expected to prop the market up here. So you'd expect these corrections and then for price to move higher. This just absolutely tore through, which was an issue, right? That's why we're expecting this to move lower. So then as we look for this to move lower, we're just identifying the key levels. This was the key level. We took some long positions from here, and I was targeting here, this high, a retest of this level, which we spoke about before, the January high, and then ultimately towards the all-time high. We didn't get that. Actually priced the sell-off here. The buyers couldn't sustain this move. We closed underneath here, right? Again, this key pivot point, support, resistance, support here, yeah? closed below it here, and then look how it became resistance through here, stopping any resurgence until we got that close above. So that's why this area then became really key here. And what we can see is it really tried to hold price up here. Buyers were very, very active here. Again, look, lots of buying pressure coming into here when we see these areas retraced really quickly, and especially to here, this stopped just a little bit short of this, right? But again, you could see sellers retracing the whole move and all the energy it took from the buyers. We're now trapped below this level. So the message from me, and I actually only shared a weekly and daily report yesterday because basically they're so very clean. I felt like the 4 hour would just ultimately add noise, because on a daily time frame, I need to see price back above this level here. Yeah, so closing above around about, let's call it 112.5, 112.550. But this is the real level I'm interested in, 113.253, right? Because again, this move here, extreme domination from the sellers. Yeah, straight through a key level that had offered, major support throughout as well as resistance. But this is an area buyers were expected to hold. Ripped through this area, paid little care and attention for this consolidation within here, took out a relatively benign low, but then buyers stepped in back here. Why did we target this area? Because this area was so important. This was the consolidation, the direct consolidation before this immense rip. Yeah. So if buyers stepped in with such aggression here, we saw it again here, although that failed, but then we saw it here with a major move. This whole area needs to be under scrutiny, because this is where we really need to see the buyers step up again, okay? And at the moment they have. So one of the key targets, as I outlined last night, first part of the plan was this, and I haven't even had a chance to get on the charts and change this yet, right? Large expansion above this. This was the bearish gap. This is the area we would expect for price to find rejection. When it doesn't, and especially when it tears through like this is now giving the sellers something to think about. If they were short from here, what do they do now? Do they close out in profit? Why is price coming back here? Do they add? So this is where we need to see some aggression from one side or the other. So that's why I want to see it close above here. This consolidation, if price closes above here, we look for this area to be retested and get back on board with the longs. At the moment, this is more likely to provide a rejection than anything. But what we are going to do is change this very important box here from red to purple. Why? I don't know, purple is that? No. Yeah, why? Because it's now an inversion gap, meaning this inefficiency here has been ripped through. Yeah, so there wasn't any repricing in it, people jumping back on board with their shorts or adding to those. Those people got taken out. Any late shorts got taken out. Any over leverage plays got absolutely smashed. Now price is moving higher. That's what happens if you chase into these FOMO moves. Yeah. If you see these large expansions and you're trying to be a buyer too high up, you better have a plan for that, because when you run into the next key liquidity pool, you're very, very easily going to become chump bait for people that are playing these moves, right? So same with this one. Ultimately we're asking, where's the hurt at the moment? The hurt is for the sellers if we get back above here. At the moment, the hurt is still with any buyers if we don't sustain this move. So it's a key pivotal place. Hold below this, then we have key liquidity targets here, and we have down here as well. We need price to get back above here on the daily scale, and that's where we are with Bitcoin. Right, so guys, apologies, people. I had to realize that my comments have been stuck this whole time. Let me have a look and add some of your tokens in here. If you have said good morning, if I've missed anything, I'm very, very sorry. Right, let's have a look. So at the moment, we're going to move on to Bitcoin dominance. Then we're going to fly through ETH, Link, XLP, Asta Stable, and Pepe. And then I can see on here Ray. Yeah, we'll make some time for that, Craigie boy. No problem. Yarrick, hello, mate. Hey, dude. PA Star, how you doing? Jojo, my good friend. Gibral Master as well. We've really got some old school warriors on here today. Love to see it. Burton as well, you legend. How are we doing? Great to see you all with us. Jojo, you superstar. You always remind me if I've missed anything, right? And guys, please do pay attention. Jojo will be dropping some absolute legacy market gems in the chat like she does every week. Okay, so Burton as well. FYI, Polymarket shows 72% chance of a government shutdown. This is exactly what we're about to rip onto in a moment as well. So actually, just because Burton's reminded me or jogged me on this, I was going to close up the show with this, but I'm actually just going to give you a very quick rundown of the 4.5 pages of notes I made last night and this morning just to process any new data that's coming in, right? So bottom line and what to watch. Key economic data and Fed commentary, like I covered earlier. The data is one thing, but we're looking at the hint of any rate speed, how often they're, how much more they're looking to cut, how heavy they think those cuts are going to be, but whether they have a hawkish or dovish tone about these things as well can have huge moves in equity and crypto markets. We want to monitor the congressional developments and the shutdown risk. And this is exactly as Burton, I believe, just raised for us above there. This is really, really key at the moment. If the US is going to go into that shutdown, this can affect things like economic data coming through. That can throw a load more confusion into a market that's already a little bit, on edge, although still super bullish overall, in my opinion. Crypto flows and ETF exchange metrics, so volume-wise, net flows, open interest, stablecoin reserve metrics. These can all be little bits we can monitor in terms of early signs of stress on the sector. Sector rotation in equity, are we still seeing tech and growth versus value, and whether defensive and quality names are starting to hold up a little bit better in this space, right? Jojo and I have some great conversations about this at the Nest, as well as some of the other traders and members as well. Regulatory announcements, probably the last key point here as well. So especially in crypto at the moment, we're seeing it with stable signs, seeing with stable coins, oversight, cross-border frameworks, and then we want to look at financial markets as well. Capital market rules, listing regimes could just shift the risk perspective on the market. All right, so it's much more a market about tone, new data at the moment, looking at the government shutdown, looking at these key developments that ultimately risk markets don't really like major shocks, and they're not a huge fan of uncertainty. The markets like to be able to price things in. So the more of this we add in the mix, the more turbulence we've got coming up. We also align that with our seasonality. September, the worst month of the entire year historically for risk markets, and especially for Bitcoin, although we've got much less data on that as well. Dr. Camino, AVAX as well. I love AVAX, Dr. Camino. I'll slap that on there for you, mate. Going to do this. We've got about 16 minutes, going to rip through all of these. Jojo saying we'll be lacking liquidity here. China market will be on holiday starting this Wednesday, 1st to the 10th till the 8th of the 10th. That's fantastic news, Jojo, and that was completely over my head, by the way, so thank you very much for that. I think that's really, really key. The other thing I would say as well is keep an eye on the emergence of China here, right? Now, it seems like a silly thing for such a huge economy and such a major player and power player in the world markets for me to use the term emerge or, the emergence. It's more on the technology sector and the AI. I think, I've got some friends at Goldman Sachs who I was speaking to over the weekend, for example. They're massively upgrading their China tech plays. So, if huge institutions like that are doing it, and we really got into this. And actually, Jojo and I, again, sorry, completely shilling you really hard this week, Jojo. We had this conversation. We've had this conversation over the last few weeks. I've been having this conversation with my trading team, my analysts as well, that China and emerging markets look like a good bid at the moment. So we really need to take that on board. And last point on this from Burton, if it shuts down, there's going to be a lot of people out of work. Yeah, usually they're exactly this. They're furloughed, right? Most of them, but some of them aren't going to be, apparently. So they are looking for full-fledged layouts. And let's look at what happened, the success of this last time when they were doing it for Doge, right? The Department of Government Efficiency, when Musk came in. They basically fired all these people and then had to bring them all back on a lot more money because they realized that they needed them to run the country. So, things like this are a little bit of a concern, definitely. So let's keep an eye on that because, what will happen is funds, everyone will just start to tighten up the liquidity and the appetite for risk is going to kind of disappear a little bit. And there's a chance that this becomes a little bit risk off for a while. But we don't know about that at the moment, but let's definitely keep an eye on that. Right, so just to recap, Bitcoin back above this level here. Yeah, ideally back above here, closing above that is 113,253. Would like to see some real impulse and impetus as well here, right? So, see these large expansions to the upside. Let's start dominating some areas that have been controlled or are being controlled by the bears at the moment. And then I think we can move up. While we hold below here, though, Bitcoin looking structurally, everything else around it, I really do think this thing has the potential to go a little bit lower. However, Bitcoin going sideways is normally really, really good for ETH and altcoins. So before we go on to them, we're going to take a very quick look at Bitcoin dominance. Now, the magic red line is the line that I did not want to see price hold above. Thankfully, at the moment, we've kind of deviated, stepped back below, and we can see we're kind of pinning ourselves in below this. This is the level that's been capping the market. It's stuck down here between our magic 57.71 level that's played such a pivotal role over the years. Ultimately, with Bitcoin dominance, we just want to see this as low as possible if we want to start seeing these runs on alts. Yeah. What you can do is just squeeze your chart up like that, go to the top of trading. If you go to your little plus symbol, go on to something like Ethereum, add it to a new price scale. And what you can see very, very clearly on here, especially if I turn this also to a line chart, is this. Yeah, we can see here When Bitcoin dominance is going up, what's happening to Ethereum? It's just getting spanked, all right? And now we're seeing it going down here. Look, as it's just started to curve off at the bottom here, just started to flatten out a little bit. And then, look, we saw the sharp drop coming in here. What did we see? Powerful upside. Then we started to get a little bit choppy here. Look how this corresponds with, this almost been ranging along here, right? So while it's kind of trapped in this level, what we want to see in terms of that capital rotation going into altcoins is for this to continue to drop. And I really want to see it holding in below this level down here at 57.71. Right, let's go. I can't remember because we've had our wonderful friends with us from Binance Square recently as well. So I've been trying to kind of mix it up a little bit so you guys get to see some charts as well from Binance. Obviously, we work with some really, really amazing partners and companies. So, at the moment, with crypto being the way that it is and with world regulators seeming to have, their head in the closet, there's certain exchanges that you can't trade in your country, right? Or certain ones that don't work in certain areas. So we always try and get a really, really good balance of the very best so that everybody that works with us, we have members from all over the world and clients as well, right? So a really big welcome to OKX, Binance, anybody of you guys out there that are watching this, really great to have you with us. So the only issue with that is I've been doing some Binance charts, some OKX, and some basically general crypto ones. So I'm not sure exactly where our latest are, but if we've got anything that hasn't updated, and here we have the beauty with the Ethereum chart. So let's take a look at the blue squiggles, the magic squiggles that have served us so well of late. Synthetics. Yeah, sure. What's the ticker, Jojo? So here we are on the daily. Now let's just ignore the Jackson Pollock at the moment. The plan was really, really simple here. This is the consolidation, or this is the kind of area that led to this breakout retest. Price went higher. So the reason that these areas align here is what we wanted to see here was either a quick recovery from this area, which we have seen, right? That's why the big green box is here. We've seen that bounce. We're now back inside this area here. This is the area that was really key before, right? This was the consolidation that led to the pump. It held price here. Buyers, again, controlling this area, went up. So what happens when we lose these areas? When we lose these areas, we look for them to place at rejection. So the reason we're a little bit cautious at the moment is one thing I really quite like, the fact that price has stepped back above this low, right? And now we're back in this area. The question for me now is this area that's been dominated for a really good amount of time here by the bulls, is this now flipping, right? Are we seeing bears start to kind of control this area? So let's move this across a little bit. This one was actually a clearer plane on the 4 hours. So I'm going to take a look at it on here, although the squiggles maybe don't look, they're okay. We can see the plan up here. We want to identify these key areas where buyers or sellers, and sellers in this case, were in control of the market. The plan was very simple. Unless we get back above this area, similar to what we just covered on Bitcoin, with a move like this, then we ultimately expect more downside, and we're just targeting these areas. We had a similar situation here. We failed to come above, and what we need to do now is dominate this, right? I kind of throwing this term around a lot today, dominate. But it seems to make a lot of sense, right? Because we've had a lot of power here from the sellers, so it's going to take a lot from the buyers, right, to come into this area, this consolidation here. We want to see this move. We want to see this area above. Unfortunately, what we did get when we had this, as we can see from our squiggles down here, is we set the consolidation, broke below it, and what do we say? Retested this area, as we can see with the blue line, were for selling. We broke down here, retested, sold off, came back into here, but now we're stepping back inside. See how we didn't get this secondary breakdown? Buyers are active here, all right? And that's really what I'm looking at. So I'm just going to pop back to the daily. Yeah, of course, Jojo. Yeah, let me make a note of that. SNX. Yeah, of course it is. Beautiful. As we pop back to the daily here, again, the safest play, to get rid of this, we don't need that now, is still kind of seeing this. Still want to see price back above this area. At the moment, it still looks like this isn't a prime area to just be flushed out a little bit lower. I think if we do start seeing some rejections in here, obviously we come down to this area. It's a really, really big area here, right? Because we had that large sell-off here. Buyers stepped in again. So we've kind of got these kind of adjoined areas here, which makes it quite difficult. For me, really, like, unless we start closing in below these lows here at 3354, in which case I think we get a really sharp move down to these areas here, this beautiful resistance area that we never really retested as support from the breakout, then I'm not really interested in shorting ETH. at the moment. And I'll tell you as for why. Again, you want to be typically shorting the highs, longing the lows. Sounds cliche, but it's absolutely right. Now, without the kind of context that we've just discussed, understanding that the markets are still overly, the markets are still bullish at the moment, capital flows, liquidity, everything, the framing of this, the macro backdrop, everything is kind of pointing towards a continuation of this bull run. We're in a tricky time for seasonality and the disruption to the market, geopolitics, as well as the fact that we've got uncertainty coming out of the US with tariffs and the wash through from that. Is kind of making things a little bit choppy. But if you really step back and look at the overall picture, it's still bullish. So something I learned pretty early on in my career is just don't try to fade the overall trend as long as you've got a good understanding and handle on that trend. Like at the moment, look at this on the daily, it's pretty tricky. The aggression is to the downside. We're pinned below an area that was offering really, really good support, or the bulls are in control of. So we need to be cautious here. So again, like Bitcoin, until we start getting back above these levels, we could look to push a little bit lower, but doesn't change the point that the overall view, the higher time frame perspective, the macro view on this is that we're still bullish. So I'm more interested in finding areas that we can go long rather than looking to short into this. So ETH at the moment, a little bit unclear. We need to get back above this level here whilst we kind of hold these. This could just be mitigation of people that try to long this area. Price has come back to it now. If those people are getting squeezed within here, it's going to depend which side wins that battle out. So we want to see that impulse, let the market show its hand before we get involved. Right, now we're going to just do a 10-minute rip through of these beasties. Let's take a look at Link. Somebody asked for this actually in the comments on one of the posts today. So thank you for that. And thank you for reaching out. That was really cool. All right, so we can see we didn't do this on the Binance chart. So let's just absolutely run through it from fresh. If we look back here, what do we got? These highs in here, any kind of key level, yeah, I would say this here, without doing it crazily accurately, is definitely some kind of pivot, right? We can see through here, resistance, strong breakout, support all the way through here, lost this area, retested, sold off, back above it now. Actually not the worst area to be involved in this. I actually quite like this here. I think we start closing below this, and there's a lot of liquidity to take out down here for Link. So really need the Marines to step up here. Some of the most active people, certainly in my career in crypto. So Marines need to step in here. This is a key buy level, in my opinion. I think we could see some action. But again, what do we want to see? Tricky here, because on a daily basis, this here's the consolidation that led to the major sell-off. So seeing price start to establish itself back above here is one thing, but that's a long way for price to go. That's up at 24,641. So let's look at this on the 4 hour and say to ourselves, okay, we started to recover structure here on the 4 hour. So something that we can do is identify where the key resistance is here. If I'm just looking at these, just kind of focusing very crudely on the main wicks and the kind of area. Price came in, found support here. Often if you draw these areas back as well, you can see they've had some prior engagement. Yeah. But I'm really interested in this. Price came in, found a tiny little bit of support here as it came into this consolidation, ripped through it. This is now the key level of resistance. So whilst we hold market structure, some kind of intraday plays, if we retest this area of consolidation, some intraday plays up into this, I'd be very cautious of this area here. If not, then what we really want to see are those kind of key breakouts of this area. All right. And then to look to go long from there. So that's where we are with Link. Sorry, really nice, clean plan. But, the start of resurgence. I like these large expansions. We just want to make sure these consolidations that precede the expansion are respected and that we build that beautiful staircase above this level. Typically a fairly inefficient move down here from price, so we could see a fast move up into here. But let's get ourselves established above here. For anybody that wants the price, is about 22,066. Right, XLP, I don't think actually. Let's have a look. What have we got? Our old friend XLP. No, maybe it's two. Have I got that? Or XPL maybe they asked for? It is possible. I'm going to take a very quick look at this one anyway, because it's a really new token. On the 4 hour, we can see this consolidation. Yeah. Price drawing across into here, currently kind of holding this area. I think this is the line in the sand here, actually very easy, which is this consolidation here continues to hold. Great. Price starts coming in and closing down below. Yeah. So, you can just even take the wicks here to say this is the area here. You don't want to see price down below this. Yeah. You want to either see price draw a little bit deeper into this and then recover. But any strong moves below, could spell trouble. XPL. I was right, Burnside. Well done, mate. Perfect. See, like British Rail, get there in the end. Right, so really key planning. This is the consolidation price drawing back down into this now. It's obviously a very new token. So kind of, this is the consolidation here. I'm not highlighting that, right? We're within that at the moment. So you could get some action here. If you wanted a different play on this, looking for a breakout, I'd look for this, the up close candle here, price closing above this, retested this area to see some strength. Then I think it's chasing down its highs. Asta. So personally got a fair bit invested here in Asta and in, let's start a fresh one here. We don't need this. This was the area, by the way, we were looking to hold. What we can see at the moment is price is now broken down below this. So this is a key area of interest. The reason we're focused a little bit more on the 4 hours of these is because they're still relatively new, right? So we don't really have a whole ton of data. I just really liked this support resistance. So obviously if we did come back down to this area around this consolidation would be a really good buy. At the moment, what have we got here? Well, this was supporting price perfectly. This consolidation, this down close candle, price close above, found support here, bought some more here, then dipped back down below this. Didn't buy here because we was expecting a retest of this. Price ultimately is just kind of rejecting a little bit here at the moment. So again, would like to see price up above this level here. When do I think that this can really have a run? I mean, it's difficult to say, right? And I know there's a lot of wicks in here, but if I was to look at that as the area that price is really driving into and finding these rejections at the moment, if we look at it across here as well, we saw a similar thing here before the deviation, price came underneath. So a safer breakout play would to see price back above this level at 2.16. While we continue to hold this, unfortunately, I think we are moving lower. Close back above this, intraday play is back up into here, but I would be careful. Asta's very much a longer term investment for me, right? So spot holdings. But 4 hour chart, where are we at the moment? Price kind of consolidating in here. This is CZ's baby, right? So if I'm looking at this now, this was the area of mitigation. So we want to see above here. If I'm looking at it from the perspective of the lows, then if I'm taking them in all of a sudden, looking at all these wicks, if price closed in below this, I think that's when we get potentially a retest of this level. So while this just looks like one big blocky mess at the moment, aggressive plays while we hold this or close above. Safer plays when we close above this here, expecting a run on the highs and higher, or if we close down below this, looking for retests to short. If we did close down below this, reclaimed it very quickly, that would be bullish because we've seen a sweep out of those lows. Right, stable. This has been an absolute beast for us lately, stable. So we never did get that, obviously being incredibly greedy. When we came back to here, Keen was a buyer here, bought again here, right? And then this has been covered on all the live shows. Like I said, this was a key level for us here. We continue to hold this. That was drawn in because that's the top of the consolidation candle before the breakout. We saw a retest here again, another great retest of it here. This was a slightly lower time frame pivot point that we were looking at. All right. So we saw here resistance through here, support, deviation, price came above. This has all got a little bit messy in here now. So I'm going to get rid of this because like we said, we moved this from the hourly to the 4 hour now to use this as our consolidation that's clearly controlling the market. This is what was controlling the downside. All right. So we don't need to worry about that now. So we can clear that up while this area continues to hold. And let me do this as a box so it's consistent with the others. Right. That's that key kind of area there. If we did dip back below this, I'd want to see price closing in below these wicks because there's clearly a lot of buyers stepping into this area. So this would be the key area to lose, then trading it down to this consolidation here if we did get that breakdown on stable. Pepe. I'm not sure what we did Pepe on last time, but I think... There we go. So let's clean all of this up first of all. Price at a really key level here, right? You can just see this straight away. If you're looking at the upside wicks, the downside wicks, you can see that there's almost a perfect line between them here. Price, a bit of a messy consolidation in here, so you could probably pop another line in there really to hold that, but that is just so clean. I would probably take something like this and then look at that as a kind of area. So Pepe now, quite nice, right? Down to support. I think obviously it doesn't look particularly nice in terms of the fact that it is selling off quite aggressively. I am very cautious at the moment about memes. I think the market is probably moving a little bit more towards a flight to quality within these at the moment. So things without utility are probably going to struggle a little bit. We just need to get some market structure going here on Pepe, right? While we hold this, I think we can move higher here, but we want to see market structure agree with that. If we start closing in the daily below this, I think there's a lot of very tempting liquidity pockets here for price to chase out. Ideally, a sharp move down, clearing out some of these, and then a recovery would be the best play. Yeah. And then we can look to get involved from there. But if we do get any breakdowns of this, right, I think then we start tagging in these lower liquidity pockets, all right? So a little bit cautious there, but I think as long as we continue to hold this, look for those structural plays to move higher here on Pepe. Right, Ray. I think we've covered Ray before. Maybe. Hang on. Here we go. So on a daily, maybe not such a clear level, but I mean, if you look back here, these areas that were kind of quite prominent in rejection here did get above, but we haven't really seen the clearest or cleanest retests of these. I would probably say in terms of a localized SR point, you'd look at something probably like this. Right, resistance through here, draws back in with this consolidation, price lost this, retest, sold off, retest, close above, buyers come in, close below, retest, sell off, close above, support again. So, okay, again, Ray, this is probably a decent area here. I would ideally like to see some lows shifted out before, take that liquidity, get some buyer, get some sellers trapped, and then look to move. But exactly as we saw here, I think we've got the same playbook. I think sweeping this and recovery, I think we can move higher. But I do think that if we start to close back below this area here, then liquidity is going to be quite tempting into these lows. All right, so looking at that, very clear plan here on that. Just want to see some moves above. And if you want to level for that, really, if you're looking to go long here, I would look for a move above here, which is 2.774 with consolidation that led to the sweep. If we got another one, then I'd be focused on this. But above here is a really inefficient move. So if price established itself here, it can typically move up pretty quickly. Same thing with here, right? Really thin move down here. When price started to accelerate, look how quickly it came through this level. A little bit of one here as well. And we can see that's matched again by a very quick move to the downside to match the one that moved higher. Right, just two more very quickly to get through. And we've got 2 minutes to do it, so that should be perfect. AVAX, if we go on to that here, let's take a look. Oh, we are in squiggle central here. Love it. Right. So what were we looking at? We were talking about the structure of this moving higher, right? Doesn't, if you've seen any of my shows, I'm a big fan of AVAX. We were looking at a similar thing here, right? Clear consolidation here, capping the market. Look at all these points of rejection. We got this beautiful move above it. Where were we looking to go long? Well, we had a couple of different plans, right? Close below this on the daily scale and expect to flush out to here. Unfortunately, we closed all the way down here, but we did end up taking those lows and we came down. We're now within this consolidation here that led to that move higher. So we have reacted here at the bullish gap. And if I just remove this quickly, we're also just tagged our key support level. Resistance, 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 resistance. Hopefully now turning support. What makes this a little bit tricky here on this time frame is the fact that we just have this really inefficient move down. So I would look to build this on the 4 hour here. And quite similarly, actually, I think this looks quite good. Because look, we've set the base, price has come up. We've now had this nice expansion here. I would just be looking for this now to start closing above these candles. Yeah, just to show that we close above that, we've got that bullish order block there, that area of demand. Look for price to come back to here and then to move higher. If price started losing like these gaps here, I think that's when we could be seeing a deeper correction on AVAX. Perfect. All right, one more to go. SNX. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you in there, Addy. I will indeed throw in XRP for you just to close off. Michael, hello, mate. Beautiful. Right, let's look at SNX then. Okay. Oh, no wonder you got your eyes on this, Jojo. You sneaky beast. This is powerful, isn't it? I mean, it's really messy through here is the only thing, but it does look like it's, it's really trying to hold this consolidation, just real back of a fag packet stuff, as we would say in the UK. If I just look at that consolidation there, That's obviously a key player. Consolidation, sold off, retested, retested, retested here. Slight retest here. Now we're ripping above it. So if I want to overlay on top of that, let's have a very quick look here. Darks, hello, mate. I have indeed, but as soon as I finish the show, you can pop back. I think we did it quite near the start, so probably about 15, 20 minutes ago, mate. So probably about 40 minutes into the show. Now, if I'm looking at this, what have we got? We've got the inefficiency here that's continuing to do well to hold price. So again, if I'm looking at this as a breakout play on the daily here, I'd like to see the daily close above this. Yeah, if we get that close above, then all we're doing is we're respecting, the market's respecting, or the bulls are in control, the buyers, right? Large expansion, sellers tried to sell, buyers dominated, right? So they're now in the hurt, or they've closed out and they've joined the long trade, right? We're now looking for that to happen in here. We've reacted at this bullish gap here, this inefficiency, price now moving higher. Ultimately, this area really capped the market for quite a while. So while we've moved above this here, I really like the look of it because we've got pretty much a really inefficient move down with all these untapped highs. So you can get that kind of wildfire effect where price just keeps tagging off this liquidity, tagging it off, engaging these stops, generating more liquidity to fire it up until basically someone wants to come along and take a punt at filling that to the other side and absorbing all of those buyers. So really nice clear play here on SNX. Then I did just say I would do XRP for our friend here, Addy. And then I need to really jump across onto this. Cool. Let me have a look. Where are we? XRP. Kind of holding these lows. It's a little bit of a tricky one, really, because there's not really anything major. I would kind of probably just actually highlight this here and say that's the area to hold. That's where we seem to be getting absorption. Price dipped into this here. We got some buyers, dipped in buyers again. Tried here, but seems to be holding this level. That's really key for me. XRP back down below this level here. Retests are either for shorting, or if we took out the liquidity down here and did something like this, that's where I'd look to be involved. And this is the key area I would want to see price above. That's where we'll set our breaker line here, right? That's going to be at 2.9274. Happy to see some impulse and some impetus above this. Look for this area to be retested and then move higher. But the plan here at the moment is if price closes below this, retest here, if we start to see weakness and sellers taking control, that's where we look for the sell-off. All right, legends, look, thank you so much for your time today. I had loads of you with us. It is an absolute blessing. I really do appreciate every single one of you that comes onto these shows and gives me your time. So within doing that, if you do want to know a little bit more about me, how I trade, the wonderful team over at the Birb Nest that I have the great pleasure of being head of trading for, not that they really take much management, they're all absolute dead-eye killers, but we've got a great education community. We provide some very, very profitable calls. Everything's transparent in what we do. Everything's shared with members. All the calls are shared ahead of time. If it is something that interests you, you can find more information down in the description about how to join us over at the Birb Nest. You can also find information here on my profile, and this is how you follow me on Twitter, BC_Richfield. Please do reach out. It's been wonderful engaging with so many of you recently. Give me a follow, and you can find loads of good free information on there as well. All right. Very, very welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your comments, your kindness. Have a fantastic week ahead. Appreciate every one of you, and I'll see you all again for our alt request show on Wednesday.